Welcome to At Scale, the tnAchieves podcast. I'm Krissy, DeAlejandro, tnAchieves President and CEO. tnAchieves seeks to be humble but ambitious, disruptive yet intentional, and student-focused while also data-driven. We believe our mission is simple: enhance post-secondary opportunities and outcomes by providing holistic student supports rooted in community and accountability at scale. But the work is much more complex. Since 2008, we've broken some things in a great way. We've built many things, and we've created something that stems from the idea that a college credential can be a powerful equalizer. From helping individual students navigate the complexities of college to shaping the way Tennessee thinks about preparing and educating tomorrow's workforce, this podcast explores how tnAchieves intersects with partners across our state and throughout the country. Let's dig in with state and national thought partners, business and industry leaders, college and K-12 representatives, and all the others in between that inform, inspire, and interconnect with tnAchieves work. Here we go. Welcome to another edition of the At Scale podcast. My name is Krissy DeAlejandro, joined by Ben Sterling, and we're here to share another, I know this conversation is going to be so inspirational, informational, all the things that we were hoping to accomplish on this podcast, Ben, I feel confident is happening as we speak right now.
Yeah, I agree. This is a really great guest that's going to provide some really interesting perspective on a lot of the things that we've talked about at tnAchieves, sort of very much in the infancy stage for us from a workforce perspective. So really excited to have on a guest that has done a lot of thinking about this and put all of the power from Harvard University behind it. And I'm excited to see where that discussion takes us and how many lessons we can learn from this national perspective to bring it into the work that we're doing in Tennessee. So Krissy, would you like to make the official introduction?
I would love to. We are joined today with Nathalie Gazzaneo, who serves as the co-director of the Project on Workforce at Harvard University. I will tell you, Nathalie, when we started having conversations about relaunching our podcast, you got rave reviews from your Nashville appearance recently. And so even though I missed it, so I'm excited because I'm like, wait, I missed it. And now I get to talk to you one-on-one. So first, congratulations on rave reviews. But second, just thanks for being here.
Thank you, Krissy and Ben, for having me. I mean, as I was telling you just before we started, it was my first visit to Nashville, and I was so impressed and so wishing that wouldn't be even close to the last. I'm glad to be, together with Tennesseans again, even if remotely today. But I'll be back.
Yes, we're gonna have to have you back for sure. Well, I would love if you just start from the beginning. Like, how did you find yourself at Harvard? Where did the project come from? And why do you even care about this work?
Absolutely. And it's really interesting because my own trajectory in the future of work and in the workforce space, it really intersects with the history of the project. But let me start from the project. So the Project on Workforce, it emerged from a presidential task force that was created by the then university president, Lawrence Bacall, in 2019. That was my first year in grad school at the Kennedy School. And that task force, it called for a clear vision and for a clear strategy for the university to contribute to the areas of skills and employability, including through integrated research and partnership. So since those really early days of the project, HPAL, like we effectively call ourselves, which stands for the Harvard Project on Workforce, we took shape as this One Harvard initiative that strives to shape better pathways from education to jobs through research, policy, and practice. And if I could pick maybe like two ways to that deeply describe who we are and what we do, it would be like these two adjectives. We are cross-disciplinary and cross-sector. And we are really research to practice oriented. So our faculty leadership, it spans across the Harvard schools of government, of education, and of business. Our staff team, including myself, we all come from previous deep experiences like in government, in industry, and in education. And we produce research not only for, but with people across these different sectors. And we try to inform their action through what we do. So over the years, as a project, as these like cross-disciplinary research practice-oriented project, we have engaged more than 350 students from the many different Harvard schools, many of which after, participating in our student activities, they pivot their careers to the space of skills, employability, and economic opportunity. And this is where the story of the project intersects with mine, because I was one of those students. I was a student member in the first ever iteration of the Cross-Harvard study group that we still have today. That was organized by the, co-founder and then director of the project, Rachel Lipson. And this is where I discovered this entire world. And I never went back, to my previous background. And somewhat, serendipitously here I am and I find myself. This is like, short interjection. But beyond that, we've produced over 20 papers and policy briefs over the time. We have organized almost 50 convenings, book talks, lectures, panels, and open webinars, and hosted thousands of attendees in these events. And we have partnered with a quarter of 100 organizations over the years to help us shape and execute these research to practice agenda of ours. So it's been a lot. But there is so much more work to be done. I mean, I still feel like I'm learning every day, and like we have, we have accomplished just 1% of what, there is to be done in this space.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like you're taking in a ton of data, maybe, actual data, but also just anecdotally from these conversations or these convenings that you're pulling together. It's incredible how really the idea of how we're focusing on building Tennessee's future workforce. And to us, the key to that is this bringing together education, industry, and community all at one table and really build out of that. And that sounds like really you guys were doing that before we even considered it. And so what are you hearing from employers? What is it that at this juncture that they're needing from education in that space?
Sure. Employers plays a central role in this space, right? To begin with, what our conversations with them and what our research with and about them shows is that when industry is vested in consistent employer practices, they can be the core place where economic advancement happens for people. So there is a growing body of evidence. And recently you probably heard of like her new book, Dr. Angela Jackson, who is a professor here at the Graduate School of Education at Harvard. She launched a book exactly about this, the win-win workplace. But there is a growing body of evidence around the fact that when companies provide good jobs and broad opportunities for workers' advancement, they also advance their own bottom line. For instance, the American Opportunity Index that was led by one of our faculty co-chairs from the Harvard Business School, Joe Fuller, and by Matt Siegelman from the Burning Glass Institute. It assess how well these largest American companies, how they are maximizing their internal talent to drive business performance and employee growth at the same time. And it shows that firms that have these lower talent attrition, they materially outperform those with a higher turnover, and they save hundreds of millions of dollars in attrition-related costs just by retaining this talent and helping people grow, right? So when we look at the top performers in the American Opportunity Index, we see that these companies, they have stronger practices to hire people that have less experience or not necessarily have a degree, a traditional degree. They offer better pay, and they have like better practices of increasing compensation over time. They move people up better and more frequently in promotions, and they also better prepare them for jobs outside of their own spaces. So people who go through these companies, they tend to land better jobs after them. And they have overall cultures of talent retention and building up careers, right?
So did you say that these employers are less concerned with like what the educational background is? That's what you're finding?
No, they are very interested in that too. Like this aspect wasn't one of the criteria for the American Opportunity Index, but I was about to continue my like train of thought around these, which is firms, they are learning units and they are crucial partners and collaborators to higher education institutions, like to where learning maybe more traditionally happens. But let me say a few words first about, firms and employers as learning units. Let me ask you, and Krissy, let's ballpark here and let me turn the table and be the interviewer for you. Like, if you could ballpark, how much of the tasks that you accomplish in your current jobs, how much of that do you feel came from your traditional education experiences versus from your experiences on the job?
I can go first. I led a professional development on this week internally. My entire job I learned at work, pretty much.
So you put like 100% in on the job?
Yeah, I would say 90%.
90%. How about you, Krissy?
Gosh,
to be a CEO.
What I lean into that I really took away from like my higher ed experience is like a writing skill set. So, and that is a lot of my job. And so, I don't know, maybe 25% came from my traditional education path, and the other 75%, am continuing to hone skills, right? I mean, ongoing learning, ongoing growth, an incredibly important part of how we think about things internally at Tennessee Achieves.
Yeah, I'd say it's hard to quantify what percentage critical thinking
of the quote unquote soft skills.
Yeah, the curiosity. I didn't have the same level of curiosity and critical thinking when I started college that I had when I graduated. And it led me to this career that I don't know that I would have been interested in when I was a senior in high school. So that's hard to quantify. But when it comes to my day-to-day tasks, my role has really been born out of Tennessee Achieves, really.
Yeah, I think what research shows is that these both words, they complement each other. And, we keep waiving skills as we grow, but that adults, they learn by doing. So a lot of the skills that we learn and that we incorporate into our toolbox and repertoires as adults, it happens in the workplace. It happens by partnering with colleagues, by making hard decisions, by having to communicate, hard things and training, how we write and talk about the work we do. So adults learn by doing, and workplaces are a very special place where this learning happens. But back to the question, firms like industry, like businesses, they have a crucial role to play in partnering with higher education institutions, particularly the broad access ones like community college or public universities, and the deep relationships, meaning really relationships between peers, relationships where both parts are talking and understanding and really partnering with each other with between local and regional businesses and higher education. They're crucial to help develop education that is aligned with industry needs. These relationships are crucial to create winning strategies for recruiting and hiring students and graduates, and also to make uh, to reform supply and demand decisions based on real-time data, the kinds of data that you wouldn't have even if you had access to the most expensive, LMI platform, because they happen as people talk and exchange and see each other in face and sit on the same table and share a language. So, I mean, all of these to say that I believe, and our research shows in our practice, sitting at the table with business leaders and education leaders and policymakers at the same time, it shows that the private sector has a big role to play.
Yeah, I love this. First of all, I love HPAL. Right. So I'm going to try to articulate this question as best I can. What I often see in the employer and higher ed relationship, I feel like is generally transactional, right? It is like, we need this many of X. How can you help us fill that pipeline? Do you feel like in the work that you are doing and what you've seen that there's much to learn, or there are exemplars in a more global approach to this partnership? And what I mean by that is that when an employer sits down with higher ed, it's not, I need, X number of people with logistics, right, skill set. It is much more like, here are the, I don't even know if we use soft skills anymore, but here's a generalized sense of what we're looking for to ensure that the students that are currently under your stead are employable, and that those skills can be transferable, and that they can be lifelong learners, right? Does that make sense where I'm going with that?
It does. And I hear you, Krissy, when you say like that. It may, like in abstract, it may feel transactional. However, there are clear and many real world cases of examples of how this relationship can be enriching and how it can derive value for both sides. A couple of years ago, two of our co-founders, Bob Schwartz and Rachel Lipson, they co-wrote this book, which is called The Hidden American Economic Engines, that tells the story of it's about case studies on community colleges that are doing a particularly inspiring job of delivering on the promise of training their students and putting them in upward mobile trajectories. And one of the community college that is highlighted in there, among others, and there are others beyond this book as well, but I'll just say these just to add color to the conversation, is the example of the Nova Community College in Virginia, and the key role that they played by the time, data centers were being built in that region, and partnering with Amazon and other companies, not in a transactional way, but truly in a strategic way, with the leadership of the community college really participating at the same, decision-making spaces as those business decisions were being made, and collaborating, coordinating resources to ensure that the region was benefiting economically and making a good investment of those new opportunities, but also creating opportunities for the local citizens and making sure that the training that the school could offer, that the school was about to offer and was designing to offer, it was aligned with industry needs, but also it was putting those students in the right career path.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. Tell me about how your work is informing. I feel like now the new phraseology in the spaces that we all work are credentials of value, right? How do you feel like your work is really informing that sort of new way of thinking, or, sort of emerging body of work
around
this whole idea of credentials of value? So that when a student goes into a university, a community college, a technical college, right, that there is a path there are better paths to employability, right? Some paths lead to higher employability. Some paths lead to, less likelihood of maybe all the things that we wrap up into like having a solid family sustaining sort of career. How are you guys, are you working through that? Is that something that you guys are sort of on? I feel like you would be on the cutting edge of this.
Yeah. And at a very high level, I'll go down. So bear with me. One of our key pillars is to produce research that help us explore and help us shape what we call the more and better pathways, encompassing like credentials of value. But what do we mean by that? We mean that we try and uplift and value what we all know the traditional four-year college education can bring to oneself. But it encompasses more than that. So we look and embrace in our research the several coexisting routes that we hope to strengthen the additional like pathways and routes to good jobs, right? So on-the-job training, as we're like talking about firms before, 2-year degrees, apprenticeships, certificates, the many forms of short-term training and learning, all of those are brought to the picture like in the work we do, and we look at them carefully, and we think they need to be studied and valued and uplifted. Soon in our research agenda, and even before I joined the team, it became clear for us that there was like one particularly space of evidence that was void in this space around the story of short-term workforce training. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't any place where you could go to have a sense of where all of these different forms of short-term workforce training, including some that may be offered by nonprofits, by, the opportunities that, federally registered apprenticeships offer, the higher ed opportunity of workforce training, like coming from higher ed as well as those opportunities that are open for workers through the use of their WIO vouchers. Like, all these conversations, it's that like, and it still sits, unfortunately, like very sparsely, and it was like very fragmented. So one of our early and continued efforts to better understand and to create more of a fuller picture of this space was the Workforce Almanac, which is like this open tool, completely open source data set where we aggregate the public information about this space, a space around, what some call like the non-degree credentials, but we call or credentials of value, but we call the space of short-term workforce training, meaning less than 2 years training opportunities that train people after high school in service of job attainment. So that's one example. We also look a lot at career navigation, and we have a specific research about that, about understanding what are the levers, what are the elements that need to be in place for people to advance their career trajectory, like as they move through, from work to work or from position to position in a company. So we do a lot of research around career navigation as well.
Can you give me an example of that? I think that's really fascinating.
Around career navigation?
Just like this lever or pull. I mean, I think that's a really great thing to think about that I think is often overlooked.
Yes, it's what we saw is that particularly for frontline workers, it's really hard to move out of, a cycle of low-paying jobs without pulling the right levers, without really understanding, what is available to them and how they can move the ladders like slowly, but steadily, continually. So this is like one of the motivations behind our career navigation, and it is a long-term agenda. So when we started a few years ago, we started from a broad review of the literature and from the experiences of key groups of people navigating particularly hard and acute challenges in career navigation and advancement. And maybe this will sound like closer to you at tnAchieves. But one of the groups to talk to in collaboration with the National Fund for Workforce Solutions, were exactly young people entering the labor market because they have like huge barriers, and not just now because AI or because of like the changing and the tightening like economic scenario, but they've always it has never been that easy for them. So they were like one of the key groups to talk to. And what this research revealed was that there are some core drivers that help people achieve career navigation success. And they include having access to accurate information and having access to information itself. So it's a matter of access and accuracy, right? A second lever is having, attaining the right sets of skills and credentials. So this ties back to the conversational credentials of value. Mm-hmm. A third of those drivers, also unsurprisingly, is social capital and the ability to have references and to be able to make a connection with people that may open additional doors, that may help us see what we can become, even if it's not the most intuitive things for ourselves, right? So social capital. I think this will still sound very familiar to the work of tnAchieves, because I know you are very strong on these, but wrap around resource and support.
Yeah,
especially when it's huge. For many, many learners and workers, it's a matter of being able to get to a place like through transportation. If they have kids or if they are caregivers, to, have the family caregiving support that is needed, like having the housing support to let them have some peace of mind to learn and to work, right? And the broader social structures and ecosystem. And
even knowing how to navigate those things.
Right.
I mean, that is a big piece of the work we do, is this sort of trying to demystify something that feels very, I think, intimidating to people if you, didn't go to college, or even if you're, to your point, like a frontline worker and you're like, I know I can go to the next level, but how can you help me navigate? How do I get there? I think it's huge.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. So I mean, all those levers, as it usually, it's like sometimes happens with our research. We usually know things just by talking to people, but it's so powerful. When we were able to say, hey, this intuition that we have, hey, these anecdotes, these stories that we all have, continuous learn. Here's the data behind it.
Here's the actual math that says it is fact, which I love, because it's hard to argue with data.
Yeah, it's still lots of people argue. Let's be true.
That's fair.
But I think it's the role I think we can play, and I'm happy we do it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how these four levers really do play off of one another, though. You have somebody that may be a frontline worker, if they go back to college, or if it's a student that's in high school and they go to college and they're pursuing the right degree, and it's a credential that's going to lead to this great outcome in the workforce. Normally along the way, your social capital also will elevate through that, through networking and gaining those relationships. And then the wraparound supports, at least in Tennessee, that's hopefully going to come into play for you. And so it's not that there's four different solutions. A lot of times it's one solution that can really solve for these levers all at the same time.
Absolutely. Or that, strengthen each other, right? They're not in isolation. They all play with each other. These more recently, maybe this may be less relevant for younger adults, but this career navigation research led by my colleague, Karen McKittrick, it's so important and so resonant that it lent itself to a continuation, to a deep dive in that first driver that we identified around information accuracy and access. And I would love to hear your perceptions, working with, so many Tennessee students on these. But we were so curious to understand, when it comes to frontline workers, where do they go to acquire career information, to acquire the information that they then use to make a career decision, right? And the lack of evidence behind that was so huge that our approach in this research was to run a national representative survey with frontline workers in the U.S. to ask them, And one of the most fascinating insights from these like more recent, these are still like intermediary findings from this research because the agenda continues, is that for a majority of frontline workers, the primary source of information, of career information for them is social capital. Like are their family and friends.
Totally.
And that was so like resonant with like any conversation I've had with a frontline worker, even with the frontline workers in my own family, right? My uncles, like my aunts, like it's exactly that. They were like listening to cousins, like to, really close family friends. And however, like when we ask them to say, hey, what are the most trustable sources of information for you? Although they go to families and friends, they say that teachers are the most accurate source. So there is this recognition around, the trustable source and what they end up going to maybe because of the social capital gap.
I would say we see the same thing when it comes to post-secondary exploration. Students can just go to their family and that can be great, but in many cases that's extremely limited in terms of what's the knowledge, their social capital. The family social capital is very low in that space. So I'd say there's a big correlation between career exploration and post-secondary exploration.
Yeah, that's true. And it also shows like why we cannot alienate, families and entire communities when they're doing like these workforce and pathways work, because these students none of us are as humans, but particularly like, younger people, they are deeply embedded in their communities and in their families.
How do we educate that whole network? That would be the question.
Yeah, it has to be, they have to be part of the solution. Also, how we learn from them, and integrate their intelligence, like in the process of like finding solutions together.
That's super interesting.
Yeah. We talk about that all the time because there have been, over the last 18 years, the evolution of tnAchieves. We always say there's a magic equation. What's the data telling us, but also what are the students telling us? And you have to marry those two things in order to, successfully move into the next, what the students need. And in this case, what workers need. And that's so great. Okay, I'm going to zoom you out a little bit. And so as you talk about this workforce development work as the pathways work, I'll phrase it this way, but I can also phrase it a different way. But if you were suddenly governor, how would you reshape workforce development or this pathways work based on this body of work that you guys are really leading?
Yeah, I think this brings me, Krissy, maybe like to the like core pillars of how we see the work of shaping this post-secondary system of the future through our research to practice, work. And I think, I don't know if this necessarily applies only to governors. I think it's truly for all the leaders in our core audiences in our core sectors. But I like to think of three main characteristics or three main points of attention that we need to have as we try to build this system. The first we have already discussed here is to have an expensive view around pathways and a commitment to build not only stronger, but also like more and more diverse pathways that can help lead people like into upward mobile trajectories, right? And connect them to good jobs and opportunities. A second, pillar of it that we haven't discussed yet, but I imagine is also like central, and we'll probably talk about this all the time. That is very essential for us, which is like this system. It has to have more streamlined transitions between work and learning, and many times these transitions should probably be blurred, right? So the post-secondary system of the future that we envision, it allows people brought ample opportunities to earn and to learn simultaneously, to upskill and to reskill as the labor markets and as occupations evolve, right? And it has an approach to learning that is way more lifelong oriented than once and done, right? And this idea around smoother transitions between work and learning, it also means that the typical learning spaces, they have to integrate skills, both technical but also foundational, like you and Ben, like we're talking about soft skills just now. They have to be able to offer these skills to people to help them land good job trajectories, having the capabilities that are required in the workplace, but one of them being the ability to continue learning, right? And a final really core feature that informs our work and our vision for this future of work or post-secondary system of the future is that it must be inclusive and equitable, right? It must unlock opportunities to the full range of human potential and correct persistent inequalities of the current system that having been like holding people back across the lines of race, gender, economic class, and more. And being, working in the research space, I have to say that accountability, data, and research, they are crucial to achieve this goal, right? We need to understand not only what works, but also in terms of like the strong pathways to economic mobility and transitions, from learning to work, but also what works for whom, for which groups of students, for which groups of learners. And we can only understand these with the nuance that is required with effective accountability mechanisms and with, sleek, efficient data systems.
I completely agree. I love all three of those pillars and this whole idea of unlocking opportunity. And also, we call it here the handoff, right? Like anytime there's a handoff between K-12 and post-secondary or workforce, fill in the blank, right? To then the workforce, it's really shaky. Like you lose students in the handoff. And so it's like, how do you create bridges? That's what we talk about here. How can Tennessee Achieves serve as a bridge? And we've always been obviously part of the workforce cog in Tennessee, but we're trying to get much more intentional about that handoff. We're very good at the bridge between K-12 and post-secondary, I would argue, very biased opinion, but I think we're pretty good at it. But we have a lot to be desired in that handoff between post-secondary and workforce. And so I would love, as we start to close, this has been amazing, but as you think about these three things, any advice for nonprofit that works in this space as we think about getting smarter about that training, post-secondary to workforce handoff that, you think would serve us well as we're building out this body of work?
Yeah. Krissy and Ben, I'm so positive that you are already getting informed and having access to research sources that are out there, not only ours, but from other people, because they see that reflected in how you talk about tnAchieves and about your work. So, I won't even try to come and say, hey, here's the secret sauce based on research, right?
We want there to be a silver bullet.
Please.
So sorry, the secret source doesn't exist. We have to keep trying. But I think there are some of our existing in past research agendas that may be particularly helpful, for organizations that like tnAchieves that are looking into these specific handoffs. I would say transitions before, but I love handoffs. So let me adopt your expression between K-12 and post-secondary specifically. One is, we have talked about that already, so I don't have to repeat, but it's career navigation and understanding the levers and what can be, lifted in the doors that can be open to those students, just so they make the most of the opportunities that a post-secondary education we give to them, like to unlock a good career trajectory, like to launch a good career trajectory. I think it's important to be aware of that. And I think it's particularly like one of our research agendas that can be the most helpful in these things. Another of our research agendas and past research that can be like very helpful is the one that we call the college to career connection. We've already like completed this research, but a few years ago, we had these large research agenda around understanding what are the better interventions at the post-secondary level that research shows and proves to be more effective in connecting people to good careers. And we created also like another open data tool like the Almanac, but it's different, which is called the college to jobs map, right? And what this research underscores is the importance and the value of interventions that are intentionally designed to bridge a post-secondary education with the reality of work. And again, this is no surprise to any of us here, but we'll see research backing the value and importance of interventions, particularly like internships, like career coaching, like experiential learning coursework, in making these two realities that students face in post-secondary education, like learning, at a higher level, learning, for an occupational learning, some like liberal arts, and connecting that what needs to be done in the workplace, or to the first personal part of our conversation, learn the art of learning that is required for us to do our jobs well and to learn on our jobs as well.
No, I love that, because what I'm hearing anyway is, there's exposure that's so critical, right? But then there's also like moving from exposure to something more meaningful during that pathway could really be a bridge.
Yeah. And an opportunity to experiment. So again, like we can think about ourselves a little bit, like how much we've learned about what we want to do, but also about what we not want to do.
Yeah.
Just because we could do an internship, or just because we could talk to someone who was doing that job, and we could job shadow that person and just figure out, no, this is not for me. I'll change here. The early years, post K-12, they have to make space for these kinds of real life experiments, not only around, the trajectories that we'll try to build up upon, but it's also around the ones I could definitely say, no, this is not for me. And I can say that because I tried and I had a protective environment to try and to say no and to just like pick another road. And that is totally fine.
Yeah, we've been actively growing job shadowing at Tennessee Achieves. We're, I think, at our most robust season of it yet, but I think there's so much more opportunity there. Just so that this in a couple weeks, actually, we have 20 employers all across the state that are going to host 10 to 15 to 20 Tennessee Achieves students for a whole day of job shadowing at their place of employment. And these are large employers, smaller kind of regional employers all across the board. And we're coordinating that on a statewide scale, so it's easy to communicate at scale to students. So they all fall within the same week. But additionally, we will allow students to count job shadowing towards their community service requirement for the Tennessee Promise Scholarship. So if they spend time in an anecdotal job shadow experience that's not part of our job shadow days, that still counts, and we'll allow those hours to be counted towards that requirement. So not only are they meeting this requirement for their scholarship, but they're also gaining this really valuable
additional
career exposure. So when we talk to students, we really try to emphasize leveraging those 8 hours you've got to do anyways. How can we make the most of that, whether that's through a high impact community service organization that's in their community, or through a job shadowing experience.
Totally. This is fascinating, Ben. Yeah, I would love to hear back, to connect after these, to learn from your learnings of these like larger experience in job chat. Super fascinating.
It's been so great. It's been such a great addition. We sort of stepped our toe in it and then saw the value in it for students and have just really tried to jump in with
it. Still feels so like new. Like
it could be so big too.
There's so much more.
What I've learned today really also is that feedback loop back from the employer after they have exposure to our students, I think is also critical to building this partnership and not working in a siloed sort of way. So I've learned so much in our time together today.
Thank you, both. I
could not be more thankful to you for your time. It has been, fun, first of all, informative, but I really value really smart individuals like you who can take big, complex concepts and make them consumable. And you have done that so well today. So I really am so grateful for your time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Krissy. This is incredibly generous. And I am lucky to not be doing these alone. So behind, and by my side, especially like hand in hand, there is like a really committed group of people that share this mission and especially like people like you both and so many other leaders across, the country and globally who are, doing the hard work of, testing and trying based on what you learn in research, but also like based on piloting inventory. And this is how, progress is made because as I said before, unfortunately, the secret source, like it doesn't exist. It probably will never, but we all can, I so firmly believe that we all can advance together better if we, on our side, we can provide like the rigorous research, but also the approachable research.
Yeah, if people wanted to learn more about the agendas that you've talked about and the research and some of the tools that you guys have created, where would they find that?
Sure. All of our research is on our website. And then, Krissy, I can share the link for all of that with you. But if you type pw.hks.harvard.edu, you get to our website. We also are very active on LinkedIn, and we are constantly sharing not only our work, but the work of peers and colleagues in research and in practice that, we find very informative, and that's on a daily basis. And we also have a newsletter. But anyone who reaches our website for the first time, you'll be prompt or you'll be informed about our newsletter and you'll have a chance to subscribe to it. So
awesome.
I'm happy to share all the links.
We'll post all those in the show description. That sounds great. I really appreciate you for taking the time today.
It was so great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good rest of the week.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of At Scale, the Tennessee Achieves podcast. Each conversation is a step toward a deeper understanding of how we can collectively expand opportunity and increase post-secondary access and success for all students in Tennessee. To continue following this work, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Subscribing ensures you never miss an episode, and your rating or review helps others discover the stories and insights that we'll share. Together, we're not only supporting students, we're building Tennessee's future workforce. Thank you for listening.